Sort of like using a compass, and I have here with me this morning a compass, and some of you have compasses that are similar to this. Those of you watching online, you're not going to be able to see that very well, but most of you all have compasses right now on you if you have your phones, because on the phone is an app that has a compass on it. If you want to, you can pull that out and look at this, just like I'm looking at my compass but right now. But imagine if you wanted to physically get to the most northern place on the planet, which is the North Pole, right? I mean, we could pretty much all agree to that. You would take your compass in your hand like this, right? And you would first be able to kind of fixate yourself to what is north. Now, it's interesting enough that because of where the stage is here, where I'm standing right now, my compass is actually pointed north, right? Living here in San Diego, it's a pretty easy thing to do. That way's the ocean, right? But if you wanted to try to get to the most northern place, right, on the planet, a lot of us would do the same thing. We'd pull out our compasses, we would find north, and we would then start heading in that direction, trying to stay as straight as we possibly could. But how many of you know that if I were to try to do this with this compass right now, and again, I'll just kind of show you my compass just so you can all see this, right? And it's not a lot different from a lot of, compasses that you have. I think I got this free somewhere. And it's been in my backpack that I take with me everywhere, just in case I so happen to break down in the middle of nowhere and I need to find my way. How many of you know that if I were to try and use this compass to get to the North Pole, right, and I follow it, I didn't deviate off of its path at all, right, and I would travel north just like my goal is, that I would not get to that destination. Did you know that? You know why? Because there's a difference between magnetic north and true north. And some of you know what that is. Even if I'm so faithful to following this compass, if I traveled in a straight line and went, over land and over mountains and in valleys and through rivers and streams and oceans, whatever the case is, I would not make it to the North Pole, because magnetic north, which is what this compass is polarized to, because it has a magnet inside of it, just like most of our magnets do, is pulling to magnetic north. And magnetic north, if you don't know this, it's an ever-changing actual place, depending on the Earth's outer core and the iron ore in the surface of the Earth, how it moves and shifts. That's where magnetic north is. In fact, if we were to all do this right now and go on this long journey together, we would actually wind up somewhere in Arctic Canada. That's where we would wind up, because right now that's where everything is pulling to. Most compasses and magnets all do the same thing. On the other hand, there is this idea of true north. And true north is a fixated point, a geological fixated point on a map, and it does not move, it does not change. And the truth is, the difference in magnetic north and true north, well, it's radically different, pretty dramatic, in fact, if you were to try to chart your course. Not necessarily over short distances, you wouldn't be able to tell a whole lot. But when you talk about longer distance and reaching your destination from a longer distance, it's quite dramatic, miles and miles and miles and miles apart. The truth is, this is a lot like our culture today, and this is how I would explain it. The world around us that we live in, it's always shifting, it's always changing, and yet it claims to have ultimate truth, right? Our world, our culture, it claims to know what is right and what is wrong, and how you can do what is right and how you can do what is wrong and how you can be reasonable. But in the end, here's what I want you to know about culture and the world around you. All at best it is, apart from the power of the gospel, is magnetic north. Moving in whatever direction that's popular at the time. And I can tell you this, if you choose to follow the ever-magnetic pull of culture, the ideology of pop culture around us, then you will never, ever wind up at true north. You'll never wind up with truth at all. And how many of you know that when you're going on a long journey, whether it's by car, you're driving cross country, some of you I know have done that, whether it's by ship and you're doing some kind of overseas journey, or whether it's by airplane and you could be traveling halfway around the world, being off just a few degrees, well, that makes a big difference, doesn't it? It makes a big difference when it comes to your destination. In fact, let's be real here. Let's say it like this. Depending on what your compass for life that you're using, that you're going by, whether it's God's word and the power of the gospel like we're talking about, or whether it's something else, and I don't care what the something else is, it could be literally anything else. The truth is, it matters not just for your earthly direction, and that's important, but it matters for your eternal destination, and that's even way more important. And just a few degrees off, it's a big deal. Maybe not for a week or a month, even a year, but what about 5 years dealing with an addiction? What about 10 years of being in the wrong career? What about 15 years of being an absentee parent and not leading by Christ-like example in your home? What about 30 years of causing hurt and pain in a marriage? What about 40 years of overspending when it comes to your finances and not saving for retirement? You see, it matters. Even the smallest decisions over long periods of time, it matters. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that I think I'm seeing in the world around us today, and yes, I do think, and I'm going to acknowledge this because I know we try to get past it, but it's still here, right? We have to give this assertion that the pandemic that we've all gone through and continue to go through, the overall signs of the times as you look at the world around us and things that we're going to, these things that are happening to us and are happening around us and the things that we're dealing with, right? I think it's all helped bring to the surface some of these things that I think are so vital for us as people and as a church. And I don't know about you, but it has certainly unearthed some things that Will needed to see in his life that I'm not very proud of and that I don't like and that I need to deal with. And maybe it's unearthed some things in your life as well. Right now, in our world today, we are seeing the effects of widespread depression, unlike anything that we've seen in our nation's history. And we're seeing anxiety disorders go through the roof, and we're seeing addiction unlike anything that we've seen in years past, any time before. One psychologist put it like this. He says it's almost as if we're in our culture living in a constant state of wartime because people are literally dealing, and they're seeing this, right? That people are dealing with PTSD on the normal in our culture today. And relationships are suffering because of it. Families are suffering because of it. People are so suffering in their lives. And listen, it's silent suffering in many cases. It's a silent killer. And it's resulting in suicide numbers that are off the chart right now. And all these self-inflicted wounds and destruction. Here's the deal. When we allow ourselves to step back and take a look at everything, and we allow ourselves just to be able to get a bit of perspective, right? And you really begin to kind of look at things from a different point of view, what you really see is that for so many of us, we've been knocked off course by one degree or another. And I don't know if you've thought about that for your life, but I know I've seen that in my life, that I've been knocked off course by one degree or another, and it's caused people at times, to be so confused And it's caused people, and it's caused families and marriages and politicians and leaders to be so disoriented. And for so many people, they're just not quite too sure what to believe, where to turn for truth, where to get some guidance from. And what used to seem to be normal, right? That word, we don't even use that much anymore. What used to seem to be normal isn't anymore. And maybe it was never normal to begin with, because if you begin to think about things and just how out of kilter our lives are, not just our lives, but the world around us, maybe it's been off for a long time. In fact, you could even make the argument, I can make the argument that we could probably say that it's not just been just the last couple of years or the last 10 years, the last 20 years, last 40 years, that we could probably make the argument, you could go all the way back to the Garden of Genesis, right, where Adam and Eve and the serpent is, and we could say that when sin entered the world through the serpent's deception and Adam and Eve's transgression, that things have really been off kilter since then, to one degree or another. And the point is, what do we do now? Maybe I've painted such a gloomy picture that you think to yourself, okay, you've built the need now, but what's the answer? This dilemma, so much pain, so much suffering, just like we said earlier. People are so divided, so polarized. What do we do now? I just read in the news yesterday, this disgruntled employee at this factory, he got so mad at his coworkers that he left and came back with a baseball bat. Beat 2 of them to death, and the third one is clinging to his life. People are ready to snap all the time. So what's the answer? Well, here's what I can tell you. The answer will not be in magnetic north. The answer won't come from the world around us. It won't come from social or political leaders. In fact, it won't come from any human intuition and man-made mandate. It won't come from any of that. Listen, true north only comes from God's Word. That's it. And if you disagree with me, I'll sit down and we'll have coffee and we'll talk about it. But God is the source of our true north, and the Bible is clear that He never changes. And the only hope that our world today has is found in the power of the gospel. Listen to what Paul says in Romans chapter 1, verses 14 through 16. Paul says like this, he says, I am obligated both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish. That is why I am so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. And some of us, that may be the declaration that we need to start with in our life. If you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time, but nobody in your circle, nobody in your life, none of your coworkers, none of the people that you're close to in your life know that you're a follower of Jesus, maybe the first declaration you need to say is just what Paul says here. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. He says, because it is the power. Say that with me. Power. Say that again. Power. He says, for it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. You see, this is the only hope that we have as a church. It's the only hope the world has, the power of the gospel. If we trust in any other source, and trust me on this, but if you put your faith in any other source to get your true north, then you will ultimately be heading in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, you will be leading others to go and do likewise, and it will only end in the wrong destination. That's why I think this series is so important to us. We need to make sure that we're using the right compass. And through the power of the gospel, we need to expose a few things. One is this idea of cultural Christianity, because biblical Christianity is radically different. And we need to expose this idea of cultural Christianity, because it's really not about following Jesus at all. It's really not about your heart and life transformation at all. Truth be told, some of us, our forms of Christianity, or what we call Christianity, what seems to be very prevalent in the church today across America, has little to do with the power of the gospel. Martin Luther, he was the father of the Protestant Reformation, right? Before he was known to be that, Martin Luther struggled greatly with doubt in his life, to the point that he almost turned away from the gospel altogether. But when talking about Romans, the book of Romans like we're studying, he said this. He says, all the shadows of my doubt were dispelled. He goes on to talk about it like this. He says, it is worthy not only that every Christian should know it word by word, but by heart, but also that we should occupy ourselves with it every single day as a daily bread for our soul. Well, what does that mean to you? Well, it should mean this, that what we're going to be studying together in the power of the gospel, it should sustain you in your